Ui mai ki au, he aha te mea nui o te ao, māku e ki atu, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Kei aku nui, kei aku rahi rarau mai kia mata, ko mihi ngā rangi tēnei, e mihi atu nei kia koutou katoa. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihi Ngārangi Forbes, brought to you by Te Māngai Pāho and Irirangi Te Motu, New Zealand on Air. A bill seeking to legally define who is a woman and who is a man has passed its first reading in Parliament. The New Zealand First Bill aims to protect women-only spaces, but critics say it risks breaching human rights obligations and harming transgender, non-binary and intersex communities. So what could this legislation mean for transgender and non-binary New Zealanders and the estimated 15,000 intersex people living in Aotearoa? Hei matapaki i te piri nei me ōna pānga, kua tai mai a Tu Chapman, Māori advocate for Intersex Aotearoa. Tēnā koe e te tuakana, kei te pēhea koe?
Kei te ora, kia ora.
Before we get into the politics of this bill, can you explain for our whānau what being intersex actually means and why so many people misunderstand it? Whakamārama mai.
Yeah, I he pātai pai tēnā, and I think the simplest, most easiest way for me to explain it without going into the biological complexities of it is that I whānau mai I te ahuatanga rereke. Ki te ao Māori nei, koera ke taku pūtake e hangai ana ki te whakamārama iwi nei kōrero. And for the bilingualists in us all, I was born differently. And so my intersex characteristics are that my genitalia didn't evolve the way it should have. I puta mai au ki te whai au ki te ao marama. And so that created some issues internally and externally, which nowadays it's taken me nearly 40 plus years to understand why that is. And tēnei tira tangata haere ake nei.
Tēnā koe me era whakamārama mihi ana ki a koe. You are a Māori advocate for Intersex Aotearoa. You've also been a survivor of state abuse and a familiar face for that hapore. How have those experiences shaped the way you view debates like this one?
Yeah, I think if I can refer it back to my mātauranga Māori, and I use that term in sense of my lived experience, and ko taku whakapapa tērā. And through my time in state care, which was mostly all of my life from the age of 2 right up till I was discharged at 17, all I knew was a system. And so through that system, I was subjected to abuse, horrendous abuse, along with thousands of others, both from whānau and from those responsible for my care. Nowadays, it has to mean something to go so deep and dark in your life and then come out the other end having a voice, because most of our people that have experienced care and abuse have not had that opportunity. So I really, really reflect significantly on the opportunity to be a voice for our people and how that grounds me today in the activism and the advocacy that I do for our people.
You talked about, that growing up in the system, so you know what that feels like. Is this another example of the system, trying to have mana over your life?
If I'm being honest, my criticism of the kāwanatanga and their approach to care and protection of our tamariki mokopuna rangatahi is brutal. But I'd like to think that those who are tasked, and particularly the system and the infrastructure, did not intentionally mean to go out to harm us, but it's happened. So now we need to fix that. So yeah, I think there's a broader discussion that needs to continue to happen about who takes responsibility for that.
This bill, it's a New Zealand First bill. It seeks to legally define a woman as an adult human biological female. What was your reaction when you first heard about it? Pehe o whakaaro?
Yeah, I was still the chair of Intersex Aotearoa at the time that that New Zealand First were doing this whole campaign about, they want to define what an actual woman and man might look like, driven, of course, by women's activist groups, some, to lead this bill because they were threatened. They were threatened by the existence of people that deserve to belong on our whenua, in our community, and in our whānau. And so it drove me, it's a couple of sleepless nights actually, thinking about how I might approach this, because the definition of woman and man singularly silos intersex people out of the conversation. And when we think about what that might mean, it actually has more impact. Well, I actually shouldn't say that. It has a significant impact on our community because we rely heavily on sex markers, on self-identification, on medical guidance and how medical professionals will deal with us because we don't fall into the normal category of woman or man, according to the government. And so our whole fight for the last 30 years, and I have to say that Intersex Aotearoa is celebrating 30 years of advocacy this year, so it's a big year for us. So 30 plus years we've been fighting for recognition, to be able to be recognised for who we are internally, because some of the issues that we have as intersex people are not your normal issues of characteristics in terms of a medical term. So I decided that I would use my voice, and I didn't know how I would do that, because when you're in an advocacy space, you either take yourself back into trauma, or, and I don't say that lightly, or you elevate. And I elevated myself above the peripheral so that people could see that, you know, I don't know everything, but if there's one thing I do know, it's this. So just very sorry, I know I'm going on, but it's deeply personal, because we will see changes. We've made changes as Intersex Aotearoa to birth, deaths and marriages and how we identify ourselves in our birth certificates. We've made changes for the first time, and I'm very proud to say that we were able to include intersex characteristics into the 2023 census. A first time ever. It's pioneering. And those are those innovative ngā mahi auahatanga that has been led by me as a Māori who identifies as intersex.
What are your concerns around those gains with this bill?
What it will look to do is it'll look to change that, because it's starting to happen now. They're not going to report on the census 2023 intersex issues now. It's just going to become a broader LGBTQIA rainbow issue. So you'll be asked to identify on that, but it won't be a specific characteristic. So that's a specific marker in the census. So that has issues because it diminishes or it dilutes our presence. And when I think about how many people in the last census identified as intersex, 15,000 people in Aotearoa, which represents 0.4% of the population, identified as intersex. That's probably the same amount of people that live in Martinborough, perhaps. So we're probably going to look at that now being phased out slowly, where it will then phase out entirely how people will identify the census. Being able to self-identify in birth certificates, in New Zealand passports and on your driver's licence and in police records means that you'll be treated with dignity, respect, and there's a process to follow, because we didn't only just change it, we gave guidance and advice to those people. That's going to get wiped out.
As somebody who has experienced trauma in the past, give us a real example of why it matters that you're identified as intersex.
Yeah, look, growing up, you know, I haven't had the greatest of lives, and I've made some horrendous, you know, decisions in my life that have impacted lots and lots of people. I've been a state of the ward. I've been a criminal. I've been imprisoned, and I've lived through a health system that misgendered and mutilated my body, and to have people stand there and say and misgender me is, nowadays it's case I'm just like whatever, but back then as a young child, as a teenager, as a tamariki mokopuna, belonging to whānau hapu iwi and hapuri, being told that you're something that your body is telling you you're not, that plays issues on your psyche, on your hauora hinengaro, hauora wairua. And so it diminished me. It really devalued my existence. I didn't want to live in this world because I didn't feel accepted. And so the reason why I went through years and years of transformation was, one, to find out why decisions were being made about me, without me, and why my body is the way it is, and whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? And so these are the things that I've had to contend with, and why being able to identify as intersex, it allows me to just, it gives me a space of belonging. People will say that te ao Māori is where you belong. And I said, yeah, ai, tika ana. I mean, ka tiro koe ki te whakapapa o te ao Māori, we did not discriminate against people. We did not silo or box people into a category that suited a Western construct. We looked at people for who they are. Hea te mea nui o tēnei ao, he tangata. And that is the one thing that was taken away from me as a child, and why I'm so passionate about it now.
Tēnā koe. New Zealand First MP Jenny Markroft, this is her bill, says women are tired of being gaslit and that progressive ideology has overridden biological reality. When you hear that and you hear politicians debating about you, how does that make you feel?
Well, firstly, Jenny's statement in that sense is ideology in itself, because it's, if I think about it, it's kind of bordering on the line of rhetoric, if I'm being honest. When was the last time someone from our rainbow community, from our intersex community, appeared for child abuse? When has there ever been a time? When was the last time a senior public servant was taken to task for some of the issues that they've contributed to in terms of abuse? I think the last time I saw that was someone in a really high position in the New Zealand Police. When was the last time there was a woman was assaulted or was degraded or gaslit or any time at all by someone from our community? I am an analyst, I'm a researcher, and I know my data, and there's one thing that I have not seen, and I have not seen that. So that statement in itself is bordering either on one, a lie, or it's trying to create a rhetoric that creates division and discrimination against our community.
Supporters insist that this bill won't remove anyone's rights. Yeah, he pono tērā ki a koe?
I think actually it'll make it worse for people's rights. Because if there's one, I saw one comment online the other day from someone, and I don't usually scroll the comments, I just go straight past them. But it was one lady who is not part of the community that says, I look like a butch man, but I'm not a lesbian, don't identify with the community. Does that mean that I'm now going to get stopped at the women's toilets and get told to strip down? So if anything, this bill is actually going to discriminate and disadvantage more the women and girls that they are wanting to focus on in terms of being gaslit. Our community will rally to support our wahine and our tamariki, because that's what we do. Who do they turn to when there's an issue? Who do they turn to for advice and guidance when they want to go cooking or shopping and all of the great stuff that makes women who they are in terms of that stuff? It's going to be our community that rallies and forms a line of resilience to support wahine who will continue to get impacted by the stuff that we are seeing in the media today that's coming out. So I think it's going to probably be more of a disadvantage to our community, everyone in our community, not just the rainbow community. It's going to disadvantage us all significantly.
ACT MP Karen Shaw says that the debate is about whether people are allowed to trust their own eyes and speak honestly. I mean, sounds simple, mama noi ho tērā, is it though?
In theory, probably, but in practical sense, no. Because we know that people will only see what they want to see, and they won't believe what they see that's standing in front of them, because it goes against their idea of what is meant to be tika and pono from a Māori sense, what they think that what people should be living within their construct. So, yeah, I probably don't pay too much attention to Karen's statement.
With this kōrero, this debate going on, and people are now aware of this bill, have you noticed any difference in the way that strangers, workplaces, institutions, or even public spaces feel for people from your community? Are they reporting that to you?
Yeah, look, one of the myths that we want to dispel is that we don't actively go out in the community to stand out or be siloed or singled out. So it's life as usual for us, and we don't go into our workplaces, into public, and broadcast from the top of the hill that, I'm going to be affected by this gender bill. We go in and we carry on because life carries on. And I have not seen any significant changes to how people are being treated, and the online commentary and what we see has actually been really positive and supportive. And koe rā te whāinga nui o tēnei mahi tūkino. How are we expected to change hearts and minds of society and general New Zealand if we can't enact that within ourselves and within our own community? So, if anything, I think the uptake since my cute little petition got 10,000 signatories last year to stop that bill coming out of the biscuit tin has been really positive. And we've seen petitions now going up from cisgendered waine who support opposing this bill, who want to oppose this bill. Those are big moves, because this time last year when I was doing the petition, it was a long, hard slog to convince people that there are faults and there are mechanisms within this bill that will undermine our total existence as humans. But we got there. And it was a great result, and I think that was the foundation or the tuapapa for what we are now seeing in terms of our community showing that line of resilience.
You talk about the feminism, the women's rights kind of community, and politicians argue trans rights and women's rights are in conflict. I mean, do you see that when you are talking to wahine about these issues?
No. I don't, because I don't look at people for what people are. I look at who they are and who they are as people. I mean, if you're nice to me, I'm nice to you. If you're horrible to me, then expect that to be replicated. It's that same simple application of he tangata and being inclusive and nice to each other. Aroha te tangata ki te tangata. I don't see it at all. And if people do know that, I'm an advocate for intersex issues, it doesn't become the talking point, because the last thing I want to do is make that the talking point where it might create some negative narrative around it. It's been quite heartening that I can actually take a load off and watch general public and people come together, particularly on my posts on LinkedIn that didn't think it would go off that well, but it did. And just from people commenting saying that I'm a wahine, married very happily with my husband and kids, and we see the fundamental flaws in this bill coming to light. What if my kids decide that in 10 years' time they don't feel right in the body that they've been given? How do we deal with that as parents? Is there any advice we can take? And this is where advocates kick in. We don't stay in Te Aupōuri forever, challenging that bill, challenging the issue. We come straight back out of it because there are communities and people wanting to know how do they navigate this for themselves and make themselves better as a whānau.
You said earlier on that you either kaupapa like this either put you back into trauma or elevate you, and you've chosen to elevate and become an advocate. But for others in the community, the non-binary, the intersex, trans community, what is the impact of a debate like this?
Yeah, look, that fear is real. It's very real that our people who are just beginning or starting to navigate that journey in their life will feel like that there is nowhere for them to go and that they feel unsafe. And that is a very real fear. That, whilst I'm elevating and being positive and trying to get some inspiration into this discussion, I'm also very mindful of the impact that perhaps my advocacy, that of the MPs, and that of the women's rights groups forget about. Is that we get lost in this tangent and we forget about the people that this actually might affect. And my heart goes out to them. And we are better resourced now as a nation to support our whānau through that journey. And so I I don't want to share a story about someone I've been working with, but I'm going to highlight very quickly that that person, was not doing too well as a result of this bill now coming out. The best thing I could do was offer a listening ear, not to tohu, not to say, this is where you should go, this is what you should access, here's the support, you can go to MSD and ask for help. There's helplines. I try not to overburden those services because they're already running on a minimal resource now in funding. And the best thing we can do, if we are not trained to be trauma-informed, is to be a listening ear and just be supportive. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to have solutions for our whānau that are going to be impacted by this. Mostly, our community just wants someone to listen.
So whānau can be a listening ear. If you've got someone in your whānau that you think is feeling down around this kōrero and wānanga, then, just listen. That's the advice that you have for them.
Yeah.
What is your advice for the politicians who are making the decisions?
Yeah, look, I don't know how brutal I can get in this or how open and honest I can be, but get the hell out of it. Worry about the issues that are impacting our nation right now. Homelessness, cost of living, tax, fuel, health outcomes for our whānau, hapu iwi and hapori, education, building a nation that we want to be able to live in and that our future generations want to be able to live in. This bill ain't it. If you think this is going to make you, number one on Trump's card, he doesn't even care about little old New Zealand, let alone this little bill, but we are following that Trumpism application of how we do things in our country, and just stay the hell out of it. Do what you can do, but don't come anywhere near this, because honestly, it is not going to end well. What if the mokopuna one day woke up and said, Nani, koro, e wene tana, he takatapu ia hau, how would they deal with that? Would they then discriminate their own whānau because they've decided to come out like that? So, concentrate on the things that really matter right now. This is not one of those topics.
Te Pāti Māori says our trans, non-binary and intersex community are taonga. Are Māori doing enough to protect our taonga? What better could we do?
One of the things that I've been championing for many years now is the terminology or the phrase ira tangata. And I've been criticised heavily and taken to the cleaners by mātanga reo, tikanga, so-called tikanga experts, who marae are all men.
What's the argument?
Yeah, so the argument for me is that when we ka hoki anō ki ngā āhuatanga o te ao Māori, ko te ira tangata te tuāpapa, te whāinga matua o tō tātou nei ao. Our existence as Māori is one of ira tangata, and it relates to our whakapapa, our genetics, who we are as people first, and that's we're Māori first before we're anything else. And so my argument there is that using this term allows Māori who are intersex or who are identifying intersex to have a basis for them to leverage off how they navigate identity, te tuakiritanga o te tangata. And it's an excellent phrase if it's used and harnessed in the right way. And some might think, you're dealing with the rangitūhangahas here. And I said, well, I didn't ever think that our tupuna would think that their ways and their traditions would ever be hard for us to navigate. And I find the application of it very simple from a te ao Māori sense.
Hei whakamutunga, hea tō karere, tō kōrero ki tō hapori.
Kia kaha tātou. Kia kaha ki te whai haere i te tihi o tērā maunga e eke nei koe. Hoia tō waka, kia kaha ki te tuku i tō aroha, kia waira nei, and just be damn good humans, because you're really excellent and amazing people. Make good decisions, be safe and be happy.
Tēnā koe e te tuakana, kua pau te wā kia tāua.
Kia ora, kia ora.
take.